All right. Hello, Mr. Schwebke.
Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Good. How are you today?
Great.
So I was wondering if I could talk to you about your PhD process.
Sure.
I guess probably the number one question would be, do you feel like it was worth it getting your PhD?
That's a tough question. So, when I was about your age as a senior in high school, I kind of set that goal. I was going to get my doctorate. And in college, I started, and you know, when you're 18, you don't really know how the world works in the university. So I got my first degree, knew I wanted to be a teacher, so I went on and got a master's degree in teaching. Your first degree, your bachelor's degree, is usually very focused on just knowledge and learning what's already been learned by somebody else. Your second degree, your master's degree, is usually focused more on your practice, being able to do something. In my case, it was like, how do you design lessons? How do you teach science? Those sorts of things. After about 15 years, looked into doctoral programs. And so I did a doctoral program at the University of Washington, which was one of the top programs in the nation, and fortunate to be living so close to that. So I gave up a weekend each month for about 3 years, and then I took a summer quarter each year as well, and then tons of homework in between. Lots of reading, doing research, that sort of thing. So coming back to the initial question, was it worth it? Absolutely, from a personal standpoint. Never from a financial standpoint, at least in education.
Now, like you said, you wanted to be a teacher and be in education since you were in high school. If you went back to right after you got your master's, would there be any tweak in your PhD and what you got it in, or do you think definitely education and that's what you're meant to do?
I think for me, definitely education. So I wouldn't go back and change anything in terms of my course pathway or anything like that. They were the right choices for me where I'm at in my life.
Okay. When you were getting your PhD, especially in the time in between those weekend classes and during the year, how did your schedule look? Do you feel like it was very overwhelming and no sleep, no free time, no nothing, or how did that look?
There's a saying, if you want somebody to get something done, ask a busy person to do that, because they know how to use their time. So I became a very effective manager of my time. So I was working full time. I was commuting just down to Olympia from Puyallup, so my drive was usually I spent about 90 minutes a day in the car. And my job there, it was not a 40-hour week job. Typically I'd spend closer to 60 hours a week. So Monday through Friday was pretty darn packed. That meant each weekend was devoted to getting my homework done. So I had to be really regimented about, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock and I'm going to work from 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock and get this chunk done. And then I'm going to take some time off and be with my family, and then I'm going to come back and do another chunk. So I did a lot of time management strategies to try to survive that. But those were very, very busy years.
And for those 3 years, that was your life.
I would say for 3 years that was my life.
Okay.
That and my job and my family. Those were like all I had room for.
Right.
And sometimes I was robbing one to pay the other.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Why do you think you were interested in education, and what is your purpose with your PhD, your original purpose maybe, and how you view it now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in a doctoral program, you learn how to learn. In other words, as you're doing it, you're expanding the knowledge base in that field. And so to me, that's really exciting to be a part of creating new learning that ultimately might be part of what people learn in their master's program 5 or 10 years from now. And so that's we call it generative knowledge in academia. It's a fancy word for learning new stuff as we're doing the work that we're doing. So as a teacher, I'm constantly trying to learn more about teaching and how students learn the content that I'm teaching. From a personal standpoint, the thing that attracted me to education, teaching in particular, I grew up in a really broken and dysfunctional household. And for me, school was the place that was a safe place that I felt like I belonged. And I probably wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the efforts of some of my teachers. As I evaluated, what do I want to do with my life? I want to have an impact and be for other people what those teachers were for me. I also found that I just really enjoy the work. So you can have a sense of calling, like, okay, I want to change the world, I want to do this thing. And if you start doing it and you find you absolutely hate it, you need to make a different choice. And for me, I've never hated my job.
Right.
I've always loved my job, and that keeps me going, even on tough days.
Right, okay. The final question, out of all the people who want to further their knowledge, who do you think it would be most reasonable to try and attain that PhD?
Yeah, I think it's almost like a person by person decision in terms of what are you interested in. So some fields, you pretty much have to have a PhD to enter into them. So if you're going into like a research science field, you're going to end up going on a PhD track for that. Other fields, a master's degree or even just a bachelor's degree is enough to get into it. So it's more, do you want to kind of have a job that's kind of, it can be a very technical job, but you're just kind of doing that job? Or do you want to have a job where you still have the technical skills, but then you're also kind of building new ways of working or new knowledge about that job? So that's the big difference between the master's and the PhD, is that the PhD person is going to be creating new knowledge and publishing that new knowledge and kind of expanding their field. So if you find that is a really motivating idea, that's then probably the track for you. But you don't just do it because it's like, oh, I want the acclaim or I want the money from that. Those are not deep motivators. They won't keep you going when you're halfway through your program and you look back and you're like, I'm exhausted, I've got no life.
Right.
So what's your motivation? If it's one of your lifelong goals, go for it. Climb that mountain, because I think that when we set goals, huge goals, and work towards those, we become that person that we're envisioning. And I think we're always in this process of where we can develop ourselves and become more than who we are today. So if that's where you see yourself, go for it. But do it for yourself. Don't do it for somebody else.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That answered a lot of the questions I had, and I really appreciate you taking your time to do this interview. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That was great.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.